Officials in China are still trying to explain an unidentified flying object seen in the skies above Shanghai last Saturday. The object was reported by several airline pilots in the area, and most of the time sightings like this can be explained, but there are some instances where there is no explanation. And here to talk about UFOs are Nick Pope, the former head of the British Defense Ministry's UFO investigative unit, Fife Symington, the former Arizona governor who claims he saw a UFO, James Fox, filmmaker and UFO investigator, and then Leslie Kean. She's the author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. She's also featured in the documentary special Secret Access, UFOs on the Record, which premieres Thursday at 8 p.m. on History Channel. Okay, so here's a question to you, Fife. Do we need to take sightings of UFOs seriously?
Sure you do. Yeah, there. If you read Leslie's book, and I don't know if you've seen James's film, but you know there's some tremendous data and sightings and information about inexplicable events, and yeah, I think we should take it very seriously. And of course, Nick Pope is very experienced in that avenue. He's done a lot of investigations on the part of the British Defense Ministry. So yeah, for sure, we need to take it seriously.
But what I'm asking you, do you think that there's life out there? There's life elsewhere?
Well, I think it would be pretty egotistical of us to think we're the only game in the universe. So I'm very accepting of the fact that there's life in the universe. And I think that probably you know, most people that are in that profession of astrophysics and dealing with matters in outer space believe that the universe is a big place and that there's life out there.
Okay. So Nick, the British government recently made public UFO documents. Essentially, it's what their X-Files. So what did they reveal, if anything?
Well, this was 9,000 pages of documentation released just a couple of weeks ago. And that's interesting in itself because, of course, the British government's position on this had always been the policy was to downplay the level of our interest and say that it was of no defence significance. And yet, of course, behind the scenes, we were much more concerned than I think we were letting on, particularly where we have sightings where the witnesses were pilots, where these things were seen by police officers, where they're tracked, for example, on military radar. Those sorts of cases we took very seriously, because if there's something in our airspace, it's a defense and national security issue. It's got to be. Okay.
All right. Wow, this is a very serious panel about UFOs. Leslie, I want to talk to you. You spent 10 years researching and studying UFO phenomena. You talked to some high-level sources. What did you find out? What did they tell you?
Well, I mean, when you put it all together, and I talked to many high-level sources, the bottom line is that there is a real phenomenon there. I mean, there is a physical phenomenon. It's well documented by governments and officials and aviation experts. It behaves in ways that we cannot explain because we don't have the technology that can do what these objects do. And there are enough cases that demonstrate the reality, the physicality of this absolutely phenomenal technology that you cannot deny its existence, and we're just stuck because we can't explain it away.
Yeah, many people want to deny it, but James, do people want to believe, you think?
I think the vast majority of witnesses that I certainly have talked to, especially the military witnesses, it's more burdened with the information than anything else. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. And this is an amazing panel, by the way, and I'm very glad to be part of it. But I wanted to ask Nick Pope, as an official who investigated UFOs for the British government, that I think we can all agree that the vast majority of UFOs have and can be explained away in sort of down-to-earth, you know, prosaic terms. However, there is a residual 5 or 10% of cases, very unambiguous cases coming from very, very credible sources.
Yeah,
and I'd like to ask
don't those
Pope,
5% at least give you pause that there may be some sort of truth?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. So there's a 5 or 10% core residual that just defy an explanation. And Nick, I'd like to ask you directly while we're on camera right now, what is the most plausible hypothesis for that 5 or 10% from your investigation for the British government?
Well, I honestly don't really know. The unknown means unknown, and you're quite right. A small proportion of the cases we couldn't identify, but we in the Ministry of Defence, we weren't clear whether we were dealing with foreign military aircraft or drones, perhaps some breakthrough technology, whether we were dealing with exotic atmospheric phenomena or whether we were dealing with something completely unknown. But I mean, the point remains, if these sorts of things are in our airspace, performing speeds and maneuvers that seem to go significantly ahead of anything that we've got, then we desperately need to know what they are. And of course, there are technology implications as well. That's one of the reasons why the Ministry of Defense was interested in this. What about, could this tell us something about propulsion system, aerodynamics, weaponry?
Okay, all right.
Don't know.
Let's not get too in the weeds here for people at home, because they're like me, who sit there every time I see something on UFOs, a documentary or what have you. I always pay attention because it's intriguing. It's intriguing. So, Fife, but I think that you have come around on this because you claim to have seen a UFO when you were still the governor of Arizona, the famous Phoenix Lights episode in 1997. What did you see?
Well, I saw a large craft come over the what they call Squaw Peak Reserve, Mountain Reserve, going from the northwestern part of the valley across the southeast. And of course, it was a sighting that was seen by many hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And it was an extraordinary moment. I mean, really, very profound. And I'd gone out there to see if I could see what was being reported on the radio, which was lights to the west. There had been a lot of reports that a craft had been spotted, and I was on the west side of the 51, which is a north-south highway, in a park with a group of people, and this great big thing just kind of cruised over, and you know, it was really a stunner. And so I remember going, and when I went home, my wife looked at me and she said, "Looks like you look like you saw a ghost." And I said, "Well, I don't."
You saw a UFO, not necessarily.
I don't know what I saw,
ghost.
but this. Yeah. I said, this was something.
So why did you ridicule it at first? Because you had your chief of staff dress up as an alien. Why were you a skeptic?
Yeah, he almost quit over that, by the way. That was a spoof. There was this sort of building hysteria about the subject at the time, and we thought that it would be fun to have a little levity. It wasn't meant to kind of ridicule UFOs or anything. It was meant to be a spoof to add some levity to the situation, because people were getting, I thought, kind of overly tense, and so we had a lot of fun with the spoof. There's aspects of that I regret now, but you know, it was fun at the time.
Yeah. So Leslie, you told me that you're very buttoned up in this upcoming documentary. Tell us about 2007. There was an incident at O'Hare Airport, and it's featured in your upcoming.
Yeah, actually 2006. It was reported in 2007 by the Chicago Tribune. It took about 2 months before it hit the news, but what happened was there was a disc hovering over gate C-17 at over the United Airlines terminal at Chicago O'Hare. This was during the rush hour around 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was seen by lots of people on the ground, and pilots were radioing about it, and a manager actually called the tower. We have the voice tapes in which the manager called and reported it to the FAA tower. It was not seen on radar, but it sat over this terminal for at least 5 minutes, probably a little bit longer, and then suddenly shot up. There was a cloud bank right above it. It shot directly up through the cloud bank and cut a crisp hole in the clouds.
Leslie, there's the part of the controller tapes I'm sure that you're featuring in this upcoming UFO special on History Channel. But I recall listening to the tapes, and you hear one of the controllers, I believe it is, saying, "I'm not high and I'm not drunk." There's a saucer, a disc-shaped object reported in broad daylight, I believe, hovering right over C-17.
Exactly. And it was a safety hazard.
What was it there to explain? How do you explain it? Yeah, I'll let you ask, but how do you explain what happened?
Well, I mean, we don't have an explanation for it. And the problem is that we don't have any official agency to step in like they did in the UK and investigate and let people know what happened. I mean, the witnesses certainly wanted to learn some more about it, but they were subtly given messages not to talk about it. Not one of them would go on the record with their names, which is a real indication of the way, you know, the stigma attached to this. And it was never investigated, and the FAA just sort of gave an implausible explanation. They told people it was weather, which it certainly was not. And that was the end of it. So we don't know what it was, but it was definitely some kind of metallic-looking disc that behaved in ways that we don't have technology that we can explain that.
We had an agency that dealt with it, and then it was gotten rid of. We're going to talk about why. Much more on this in just a minute.